Hi everyone, my name is Amy Johnston and today I will be talking to you about coastal ocean darkening. This topic was an obvious choice for me because I've always had a natural affinity to the ocean. I first visited the Pacific Ocean at the age of 7 and it left me in awe. From that moment, I knew I had to spend my life in or around water. Over the years, I gained an interest in water quality and hopefully get to spend my career tackling and improving water quality issues. During this presentation, I will be covering what coastal darkening is, why this is such an environmental issue, and how it became such a huge issue. We will go over the research and results of this newly published Norwegian study, possible solutions that can have potential corrective measures, as well as some interesting additional claims scientists have included in their reports. And finally, we will end with our conclusion. Most of us are aware of the issue of algae blooms and deoxygenation that can occur in lakes and rivers. It has been well studied and monitored regularly. However, scientists are just beginning to realize the way it affects coastal waters downstream. The effect is a coast that is slowly and steadily growing darker. This process is appropriately named coastal ocean darkening. So what is coastal darkening? Basically, it is the reduction of clarity and penetrable light along oceanic coastlines. This type of event can negatively affect water quality while creating an uninhabitable ecosystem. As we will discuss further in the next few slides, coastal darkening not only affects the magnitude of the coastal aesthetics, it affects the physical and chemical composition. Studies suggest that anthropogenic activities have kick-started coastal darkening. This is primarily due to utilizing an increased amount of fertilizers to lawns and in farming procedures. Sunlight is critical for survival. It is one of the most important factors for balancing marine food webs. Sunlight can only naturally reach certain depths. This zone is referred to as the photic zone. It extends from the surface water to 200 meters in depth. If we take a look at the chart on this slide, we notice the photic zone contains the microscopic zool and phytoplankton. We'll be discussing their relevance and importance shortly. Now that we know what coastal darkening is, we can discuss what it is in depth and what the underlying causes are. One hypothesis for the occurrence of coastal darkening occurs when a buildup of TDOM, or dissolved organic matter, is transported from adjoining rivers and released into coastal regions. Once in the coastline waters, the TDOM is mixed with suspended solids from the ocean floor. This is the product of boats disturbing the water, ultimately making a slurry from both materials being mixed. Because the particles are so fine, these materials remain suspended, which is why the water stays a brownish color. This eroded material is generally rich with nitrates and phosphates. Fertilizers that leach into river waters promote the growth of algae. Heavy rains can contribute to the transportation of the organic matter into neighboring rivers or streams. This matter is usually decaying leaves, soil, or plants. The substance enters the ocean as a brown muck that stays easily suspended as a dissolved solid load. Excess nutrients that accompany the organic matter often create algae blooms, inhibiting sunlight penetration. Algae blooms, if severe, can block out penetrable sunlight in the photic zone. If we observe the pictures on this slide, we can see various forms of coastal darkening in the Norwegian fjords. On the left, we can observe a boat kicking up the silt bedload causing the slurry. The top right is a NASA aerial photograph of the darkening throughout the Norwegian fjords. And last but not least, the bottom right is contaminated water draining into the oceanic waters. Although the research we will be covering was conducted in the Norwegian fjords, coastal darkening is a widespread issue. Unlike the algae bloom effects on freshwater, the blooms in saltwater do not produce dead zones from eutrophication. As mentioned previously, coastal darkening has been monitored in the Norwegian fjords. The process of darkening has been occurring for over 100 years. However, it is only recently that scientists have had their data published. This study that is ran out of the University of Oldenburg in Germany is called the Coastal Ocean Darkening Project. It was headed by Dr. Zielinski and conducted by Maren Strebel, an aquatic ecologist. The goal of this project was to measure the effects of reduced visibility and light availability on phytoplankton. The photos attached to this slide represent just a couple tools utilized in the study. The upper right shows an aquatic drone, which are mainly used to locate and eliminate waste. Next, we have a woman using a tool called the Eye on Water app. This program identifies oceanic coloring, which contributes valuable information to the study. And the last photo is a light sensor tool. This helps to measure underwater spectral distribution. For this research study, Strebel created a large-scale experiment where she utilized 3 simulation tanks. Each vat included water, silt, phytoplankton, and a brown slurry extracted from peat. A UV lamp was hung above the tanks to simulate sunlight. The vats had varied peat concentrations, low, medium, and high, with light reduction levels set at 27%, 62%, and 87%. Phytoplankton use photosynthesis to transform inorganic carbon into carbon compounds, in turn, theoretically, producing as much oxygen as some plants do. This action helps regulate the carbon cycle. Additionally, these organisms are crucial to the aquatic food web, so their survival is a necessity. Since phytoplankton are a staple in the food chain, Strebel included zooplankton into her study. She wanted to see if the abundance of phytoplankton correlated to the zooplankton population. The Coastal Darkening Project observed and measured phytoplankton and zooplankton populations for 35 days. In fact, on the graph, you can see that the differing peat concentrations had an impact on the zooplankton, which directly mirrored the reduction in phytoplankton. However, notice the 30 to 35 day data points. The zooplankton population increases. By day 35, we can assume both populations of zooplankton and phytoplankton were thriving. How could this be? The Coastal Ocean Darkening Project ran into some unintended quirks. The longer the experiment continued, the darkening of the water slowly dissipated. Artificial sunlight and the microorganisms started degrading the matter used to simulate the murkiness. Real-world assumptions claim this is inaccurate. The TDOM is a steady contributor to the darkening. Heavy rains and runoff would continue to pour the slurry into the coastal waters. This would create a situation where phytoplankton would not have the chance to dissolve enough of the substance to make a difference. Strebel also came to an issue with the artificial tide chambers located at the bottom of the vats. These chambers were set to reduce or increase water to simulate tide coming in and going out. What she realized was when her mimicked low tide occurred, microorganisms at the bottom of the tank were not affected. Due to the UV lamp's ability to penetrate the artificial slurry in the tanks, bottom-dwelling organisms were able to remain virtually unaffected with the light they did get. This is not conducive to real-life situations. The reason being that sunlight does not always reach the depths in some geographic locations during low tide. Another interesting observation Strebel made was the changing character for the zooplankton. When the phytoplankton numbers dropped, zooplankton started favoring one specific species of phytoplankton. So, if zooplankton are affected in this manner, phytoplankton fluctuation could create competition throughout other microorganisms in the food web as well. Resulting from those actions could be a loss of species or overabundance of another, which could impact the food chain in its own aspects. But I digress. While Strebel found that even though various marine species in the food chain were affected by coastal darkening, jellyfish populations remained untouched and unaffected. Strebel's conclusion: they can't see. Jellyfish hunt for food, lacking the conceptual need for visible prey. So other than the lack of phytoplankton abundance, marine predators also struggle to eat if they cannot see to hunt their next meal. Even if phytoplankton and zooplankton remain constant, the darkening still has an impact on other species' ability to eat. There are a few species of fish with specialized eyes to see in these waters, but they're a unique case. Other issues that darkened water promote is potential for a chemical imbalance. Amanda Post, an affiliate with the Norwegian Institute for Water Research, observed a chemical change within coastal waters after prolonged sunlight absence. The chemical mercury can enter lakes and streams through soil and eroded rock, being transported into oceanic coastal waters. Without adequate sunlight to break it down, mercury converts into methylmercury. This toxin can then be absorbed into the fish supply through respiration or swallowing contaminated water. Methylmercury also absorbs 6 times faster and can migrate through cells, which makes it more dangerous than inorganic mercury. Depicted on this slide is the process of bioaccumulation through the food chain. If you are not familiar with bioaccumulation, it is the process of accumulation of a chemical substance in an organism. As the chemical progresses higher into the food chain, the concentration of that chemical increases, making it more toxic as it climbs up the food web. Worst case scenario, this could devastate species and harm humans that consume food containing the toxins. Humans with methylmercury poisoning often exhibit neuropathy, numbness, pins and needle sensation, or loss of muscle control. It is especially toxic to pregnant women and can easily be passed to their unborn child. This could result in a baby born with severe birth defects. So how can we stop this? Norway has started mandating new requirements and regulations for fertilizer use in areas that drain directly into the fjords or other major waterways. These new guidelines implement stricter fertilizer usage. Farmers have also been put under a time to plow order. This means that farmers can only plow their fields at a specific time of day, week, or month. Lawmakers argue that these actions can reduce the excess nutrients that make their way into the ocean. If successful, then in time, the magnitude of algal blooms and slurry that congest the coastal waters can be significantly reduced. The Coastal Ocean Darkening Study has, unfortunately, encountered contradicting data during this study. Since this study is so new, there are preliminary results, but nothing can be set in concrete just yet. Scientists are claiming that there could be a positive impact for every negative one they experience. For instance, darkening may inhibit some species from feeding, but shelters other species from predators. Climate change alters the bloom of phytoplankton population to an earlier arrival, while the darkening slows down the bloom. Could this be a good balance? We don't know just yet. Some geographical locations have even exhibited water becoming clearer without human intervention. Additional worldwide research can further help us to better understand this phenomenon. In conclusion, our waters are in trouble. It is all too often we take issues lightly until it is too late. Luckily, there is still time to right our wrongs with coastal darkening. Education is key, and if we can incorporate knowledge into regulations that are being enforced, it can improve willingness to join the cause. Taking accountability and adhering to the requirements instated by governments, we can and will push toward a successful outcome. Additional research on coastal darkening will soon provide a greater understanding of long-term effects and whether our efforts have been progressed towards healthier water bodies. It is imperative we take corrective actions now before it is too late. Thank you.